to be I've broken up into kind of functional areas, not functional areas, in terms of what reasons why you would view the reports, I suppose is the best way, for lack of words. So there's certain reports where, an action is required, like an opportunity needs authorized and things like that, which is a form of report. Then we've got maintenance, how to keep your data clean, etc. And then we've also got measuring the success, general kind of KPIs, what's the age, all that kind of stuff of your volunteers, measuring the success of your volunteer program. And then I'm going to go on to like marketing and comms, how to communicating with users, and how to essentially get more volunteers to register on your system. And then we're going to go on to like geographical reports and the maps reports, always exciting for me anyway. Then custom reports, and then downloading data, which is something you use, and when you would download data, and when you would opt to use to get a custom report. So there's going to be quite a lot of kind of links or information in regard to where reports are, specific reports are. Don't worry, there is a document supporting this, which lists all the exact locations of all these reports that that you're going to see on the screen. So you don't have to write them down or scribble down any addresses or names or anything like that, or you can watch them, and if you remember them, great. But if you don't, we'll be emailing across this document here, if you can see that, but a document here to yourselves, which will go over all this information for you. So just sit back and relax. Okay, action required reports. So in terms of action required reports, I mean, most of you are familiar with these, opportunities for authorization. So, providers for authorization. So when you first log into the system as admin, we're going to be mainly talking about admin reports here. When you first log into the system as admin, we've got the summary, activity, open opportunities, and tasks. And a lot of these reports here, certainly the summary one, which is the first one that opens when you log into the system.
They've just been asked by a couple of people if you might be able to make the screen a little bit bigger.
This screen bigger?
Or go to full screen mode for your presentation.
I'll try going to full screen mode. 1 second. Okay. As I do that, how do I get back onto my there? You see that? Can you see that?
No, we can only see the meeting screen.
Yeah, so I thought the problem might be. Let me try sharing again.
You can press escape to get out of full screen mode on slides.
So I present now. If I present a window or the entire screen, that's the question.
A window.
For that, for that, okay, for that. You see that now? Is that any better? No? Can you see that?
Joanne, is that okay for you? Are you able to make out what's on the screen, or is it still a bit small?
It's fine if it doesn't work. Don't worry about it. It's more for the presentation than for the actually looking at the site.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I've lost the presentation now. It's fun. Okay.
At least you're not on a power cut.
Yeah. The presentation tab's just closed down. Give me a second. Just stop sharing that and get the presentation back up. Okay. Back into that. To that. Present now. It's always the issues are always with screen share. I noticed doing hundreds of these training sessions. Right, let's go on to that. Share. There. Everyone see that? My mouse moving around? Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Good. Okay. So we've got like the main actions required. So when you log into a system, there's certain things that you have to do You have to do, like, if there's opportunities waiting for authorization, then you have to authorize those opportunities. Otherwise, obviously, no one's going to be able to see them. Same for providers. Now, these will disappear if there's no providers or waiting for access opportunities. They do disappear now. It's one of the updates that I'm working on. It's trying to minimize the information, or minimize essentially like empty boxes that appear on the dashboard. So if there's nothing there to say, then just hide the box. So we have like our actions. Let me find it here. Our action required reports here. What I'm going to try and do during this session is kind of tap into, rather than go through all these different reports, is go through the ones that I think maybe people don't tend to notice or don't tend to look at. The chatter messages since last login. So I'm not sure how many of you use the chat feature. For those who don't, there's the ability, essentially, as Rolf mentioned earlier on, you can have a mini chat room, like a mini forum against each opportunity, where volunteers can ask questions about the opportunity, and other volunteers can answer that question, or the provider may answer that question. And the only people who can see that those chat messages are the provider of that opportunity and the volunteers who are on that opportunity. And obviously admins, because admins can see and do everything. Well, under the task tab, when you log in, under the task tab down here, we have chat messages. Where is it? I was to log. I haven't got any chat messages. There's an example of why it's not appeared. You test this on one system, you go into another, you can't see it. But it does appear here. If you have any chat messages, it will appear within this box here, and you can actually see any messages, any kind of conversations that are going on within the opportunities. Although it is the provider's responsibility to kind of keep an eye, and they'll receive an email when someone adds a chat message on there. There is a trigger there for them to log into the system and look at it. It's also useful for an admin to be able to see those conversations, basically keep an eye on those conversations, and they may be able to jump in and answer the questions for them as well if they want to. One of the other ones is opportunities that end in 7 days. So opportunities that end in 7 days. There's no opportunities on this system that end in 7 days, but essentially if you think you've got your flexible opportunities and you've got your session-based opportunities. And for some of those, especially the session-based ones, they might say, okay, I need a litter picker and I need them to go on for 52 weeks of the year, and it's every Sunday for 52 weeks. And then it gets down to that 51st week, and they haven't created the sessions for the next year. Some of you might say, well, why don't you let them create sessions for the next 10 years? But the reality is, if you do that, and then the provider disappears off the radar, they've got an opportunity with lots of open sessions with volunteers joining it, and there's no provider to actually, follow them up. So that's why we kind of tend to limit the duration of these opportunities, and we kind of force the provider to kind of go in there and ask themselves the question: is this still happening? Is this opportunity still still taking place? But you have this on here where you can see if there's any opportunities offered by any of your providers which are about to end in the next 7 days, and then at least you can ask the question, or even ask the question of the provider. Are you sure? Do you want to extend this? And that goes for the same for flexible opportunities as well. Exactly the same principle there. So that's something which I see, because people have asked me before, says, is there any way, what happens about extending them? How do I know? Or they've kind of been automatically closed because they reached the end date. So that's a useful little report for you there. We've also got, if you're using, we've got like these are action required, but the action's only required for these particular reports if you're using that particular module. So if you don't use the meetings function within the system, then obviously it doesn't matter. You don't need to go into the meetings. You don't need to go into opportunities and volunteer management down to meetings. You don't need to go into that page. But if you do use that module, then any of these modules, then you should be going into those reports, and that gives you kind of information, or the meetings, any up and coming meetings, for the roles, touch about your role applications, which Rolf mentioned earlier on. If you're not sure, some of you I know won't be sure what roles is. Don't worry if you're not. It's not for everybody. It's essentially a role is like a set of hoops that volunteers need to go through before they can get onto an opportunity. We've got the log all hours, which I think Anne mentioned earlier on. I know this is an issue for some of you. I might explain this. Actually, might be a good time to explain this to some of you. So when it comes to the login hours, we have the volunteer log hours and we have the provider logged hours, and the two separate numbers that are stored within the system. And the one we care about is what the provider says, the provider logged hours. It's the one that we trust. That's the one that powers all of the incentives within the system, and it powers all the reports within the system, important reports that you take to the board, etc. So So quite often it's a struggle for yourself to sometimes get those providers to log the hours. Now, whenever you can always step in when you're an admin to any opportunity and you can log the hours on behalf of the provider. But if it's something which is like an ongoing issue for yourself, you can always go to volunteer management, log all hours option down here. And this will show you, as it loads up, it will show you a list of all volunteers with all hours that need login on all opportunities. Okay. Now there is a kind of not a caveat to this, but there's something you have to keep in mind is for the session-based ones, that's fine. It makes sense. It knows exactly how long they should have turned up for. So say if it's they turn up for 2 sessions and they were an hour long, well, there's 2 hours then, 2 hours that need login. Now, so the system knows, okay, then, well, if I log all hours, I'm going to log those 2 provider hours because I saw the volunteer was on that. Even if the volunteer hasn't done it, I saw they're on that opportunity. It's a bit harder with the flexible opportunities. So with those flexible opportunities, if you imagine, because with the flexible ones, you're logging hours as and when you go along. You don't know exactly when the volunteers turned up because that's kind of discussed between the provider and the volunteer. So what it has to do is it will look at what the volunteer has logged on those flexible opportunities and it will match that. So there is a kind of, you're kind of hoping that the volunteer's done their bit, but that's the closest you can kind of get, and there's no easy way around that. You don't know exactly if they turn up or not, for a flexible opportunity. So that's one way that you could try and kind of pump up those provider logged hours and get them close to reality as you possibly can, because I know it is a struggle with some of you. So you tell me. Okay. Maintenance. There's only a couple on here. Now the maintenance ones really are, how to maintain the data integrity. That's IT speak for you, isn't it? The data, the cleansing of the data. That's another IT term. Basically, it's trying to keep your data nice and ordered. And one of the things is for the search tags. I don't want to go into both of these. One of the things is for the search tags, though. For those who use a search tag. So when you're creating an opportunity on here, it's going to take me to a new opportunity creation page now. Yeah, it is. Okay, you got your search tags down here. So your search tags are, when you create an opportunity, say it's you need an under 16 football coach, you might tag it with the word soccer, because someone might search for the word soccer and you'd want it to bring up this opportunity. But then there's a problem when you can run reports on that and say, okay, show me every opportunity. Sorry, how many volunteers have been on opportunities which have been tagged with the word soccer? No problem. But there's an issue if someone puts in soccer and spells it wrong, or soccers, or some variations of it. The variations I tend to see with admin on the search, putting the search tag here, and it's kind of like desk-based work, and I'm going to search tag, I'm going to use as admin. Then someone else uses administrator, and someone else uses administrator. All these variations, and it should be the same thing, but from a reporting perspective, that's obviously a nightmare because it doesn't know that they're the same thing. So when you're coming to look at the reports, it's going to show you, you're going to end up adding together admin and administrator and administrative and all these different phrases that people are using in the search tags to get the actual answer you want. How many people are interested in administrative work? So you can clean up that data using this tool here, the search tags tool, which is essentially, when you go at the top here, opportunities and providers, opportunity activity tags, and then you can see what all the tags are down here. And all you're doing is looking for ones that are similar. I mean, this is the beta test site, so it's full of a load of nonsense. But anything which is similar, you should be asking yourself the question, why is that similar? And trying to correct it, trying to cleanse that data. Okay, and there are reports in there, which I'm going to come on to shortly, where you can report on those tags, as I mentioned before. Okay, general awareness of activity. I think most of you know these anyway from the reports. You've got your from the summary reports when you first log in, kind of what's happening today, activity in the last 30 days, the tasks. These are all things that you see from the main admin dashboard. So when you first log in as an admin, these summary, activity, open opportunities, kind of one, I suppose, and tasks. So these are things we've put there, which I think are common things that you're going to be interested in looking at when you first log into the system. The day schedule is an interesting one. Interesting to know how many people actually use the day schedule. Alex, can you run a poll for me on how many people use the day schedule, if they use the day schedule, if you can? I'd be interested to see The answer isn't that. The day schedule is it's relatively new report that has been built. And as Rolf mentioned before, it shows you basically what's happened by default, what's happening in the next 7 days. You can choose by opportunity or event, because from the feedback that we get at this end is quite often you turn up on a Monday morning and you know, you're in a volunteer centre, whatever your organisation type is, and you want to know what's happening this week. What opportunities are taking place? Are they, you know, are they filled? Have they, you know, do I need to promote them further, etc. So this is a really useful report to see that. So we've got general KPIs for the board. Now I always say when it comes to reports, you know, there needs to be like a purpose to it. So when you view any report, I used to work in the NHS from a sins quite a few years ago before I started with TeamKinetic. And the amount of reports I used to deal with, where people would produce reports, and once you traced it back to the origins, you'd realise that there was no action, there was no perceived action. Someone would look at that report, it doesn't matter what that report said, there was nothing they would ever do differently. So you kind of ask the question, what's the point in producing the report? So there should always really be an action for any kind of reports. But then you also say, well, I have to produce it for the board. Well, that's a kind of an action, isn't it, I suppose? And the board may have an action. So I know there's a number of you who do have to produce reports for the boards. And these are the kind of reports that we're talking about on here. So you've got your quick stats, which you would look at. So when you go to reports and analysis, so it loads up. Running a bit slow because we're all screen sharing. Okay, you've got your kind of general stats, how many volunteers have registered on the system, how many confirmed hours. That's like, when we say confirmed, it means like provider logged out, providers have confirmed it essentially. Opportunity sessions. Converters is always an interesting one. So when a volunteer registers, out of 145 volunteers here, 70 of the volunteers have been converted. What does converted mean? Steve, good question. Converted means that they've gone on to join at least one opportunity. Okay, so you're always trying to push them from the registration into being converted. Okay, and 48% is actually very high. That'd be very good. It's usually around about the 30s, 35s. Depends on your organisation type. I've seen it as high as 90s before, but depends on your organisation type really. Then from the converted, you said, okay, then it joined an opportunity. Have gone on to log hours. So out of those 70, 62 have gone on to log hours. And then out of those 70 who you converted, 49 of them have joined more than one opportunity. So you're constantly trying to push them from left to right, from the registration to converted, getting them logging their hours and getting them joining more opportunities if you can. So that's one of the reports which the board tend to ask for. Another one on here is, get to it a sec. I had it myself here. Is active volunteers. Okay, something I'm going to touch on here. Oh, sorry, the date ranges. Didn't mention the date ranges. You can change the date ranges here as well before I jump on there. So if you said, okay, I want to know how many people registered between, last year, then if you change the date ranges and click update, it will show you registrations that happened last year. This active thing, as Rolf mentioned earlier on, it has been, it's been an issue in the past in terms of people understanding people. It's easy to say the question, say, okay, well, how many volunteers have been active last month? You say, well, that sounds straightforward. But the reality is, what do you mean? What do you mean by active? You say, well, I mean, they turned up and done some volunteering. You say, well, how would we know that? How would we know? Well, one way we know is that they join a session which takes place within that month. So great. Well, if they joined a session that took place within that month, then we can say that they were active. Okay, but what about the flexible opportunities? Well, for the flexible opportunities, you don't know. There is no sessions. Essentially, it started today, it ends next year. The volunteer just logs the hours, and the provider just log the hours as they go along. So we have to use, for the active volunteers, we have to use a combination of, if it's a session-based opportunity, then does the session take place within that month? Okay, let's include it. Let's say that person, any volunteers on that session are active. And then we have to look at, also for the flexible opportunities, did they log hours? Were hours logged within that month? And then we have to combine those two numbers together. So whenever you see active volunteers, whenever we talk about active volunteers, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that definition, being an active volunteer. Is there any questions over that? Am I okay with that? I can't see. Shout, let me know if there's any questions. Okay. Okay, next we got scroll down here. Okay, is that a question? Was that someone just talking? Got
is Matt has got his hand raised. Oh, their hand raised.
Oh, sorry, I can't see that. Just let me know if someone raises their hand if you can. Yep, you can fire away and mute yourself.
It might be an old one.
All right. Okay, shall I carry on and see if you can type the message in because I can't hear him. Okay, we've obviously got something else that I realized recently is some people are not aware that we have reports for opportunities and events. You know, so if you're here, we're looking at all volunteers across the whole system. Yeah, if you go to any opportunity, let me find an opportunity with some volunteers on it. Okay, hopefully we've got someone here. Okay, there's one there. So if I look at this opportunity here, when you go to a specific opportunity, if you scroll down, we've got reports. Now this is based on volunteers who are on this opportunity. Okay, and the same when providers, when they see their reports, as Rolf mentioned before, it's based on volunteers who are linked to them, volunteers that kind of have an affiliation with them on their opportunities being the number one way. But against each of these opportunities, there is some really interesting reports. Some people, I've got a feeling they don't scroll down the page here. We have the basic website activity, which for those of you aware, and I had the training, you know, this is very useful because not this one because it's flatline, but it shows you how many people are actually clicking on the opportunity. So it's really interesting. You know, if you had an opportunity where it was a straight line like this, then it means that no volunteers, they might have seen it within the search page, but no volunteers have clicked on to view more details about that opportunity. So that tells you something. It tells you something about the opportunity. There's something. It's nothing in the detail that's putting them off, but it must be something probably in the title of the opportunity that doesn't sound interesting enough, or maybe it's been restricted in a particular way where not enough volunteers are seeing it, which I'm going to come on to later on this afternoon as well. Restrictions. Okay, so that's a really interesting report where you might have a report where there's a huge spike and you say, well, okay, I've got 50 people looking at this opportunity, but no one's actually joined it. And that also gives you insight. Why would that be the case? That's very improbable that 50 people have looked at it, have clicked on the more details, but no one's interested in it. So you could say that it's to do with the description of the opportunity. More than likely, that would be the restrictions rather than the description, I would guess, from experience. So yeah, that's a really interesting report. Then we've got KPIs, like you say, on all the volunteers who are on that particular opportunity. And we have the same for events as well. When you go to your events. Okay. If you click on an event here, okay, you've got activity in similar thing here. We've got the line graph, website activity. So this is how many volunteers are looking at all opportunities on this event, because an event is a group of opportunities for those of you who use events. And again, we've got the KPIs. Now these KPIs, they're showing KPIs across all volunteers on all 7 opportunities. Okay, so you can look at specific opportunities or specific event reports if you want to. Measuring success. Now, it's always a hard one from this side because we don't know, you know, there's different ways of measuring success. Now, the obvious way of measuring success, so this is of your volunteer program, is you could say, well, I'm looking at the number of volunteers on the system. That's my measurement of success. You say, that's great. Then you could have a system which has got 100 volunteers and only 10 volunteers have actually joined one opportunity. You know, then you've got another, you know, so you might have 90% of your volunteers are joining opportunities, and it's very different. You've got the same amount of volunteers, but they're very different. A picture of a success, you know, should be very different success levels, for lack of words. But you can see them from the admin dashboard, some of the KPIs. You can see your kind of basic KPIs when you log in here. Again, on your summary page here. So we have our basic KPIs listed across the top here. I mean, is there any other I'm interested in getting a bit of feedback from you at this point. is there any kind of, how do you measure the success? If it's not the login of hours, how many hours have been logged, and it's not the number of volunteers, what other ways might you measure the success of your volunteer program? If you want to unmute yourself and just or put your hand up, maybe. Okay, Fiona, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hello. Yeah, the feedback indirectly is really useful for us. So obviously, I think at the moment I'm not getting loads of that from my volunteers when they're signing up for sessions and when they've finished volunteering on a certain event. And that's definitely been useful for us, just in terms of we include those sort of quotes within our reporting as well.
The feedback, so when they've been on the opportunity and ask them to leave feedback. Yeah, it's useful. Yeah, for marketing as well, it's useful, isn't it? Which we'll get onto shortly. Yeah,
definitely.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other ideas how do you measure the success of your volunteer program?
Hi, it's Rosie Wiley here from Historic Environment Scotland. So
Hi,
just
Rosie.
really similar to what's just been noted there. So we capture qualitative data. We try to do that in surveys out to volunteers, visitors, staff members that have all engaged in the similar experience. But I mean, and apologies if you've already said it, but am I right in thinking that TeamKinetic can link to like survey tools that we use, so Citizen Space, etc., or does it have its own inbuilt survey for that if we wanted to do a kind of broad brush?
We have so you can turn on within the super admin settings, for those of you who have not seen it, but yes, there is the ability when you create an opportunity to say, okay, add a survey, and you can. It's not a survey built. It's not a TeamKinetic. So in all honesty, if we built it, it would never be as good as SurveyMonkey, for example. Somebody who specializes in it, but it allows you to put in the link to the SurveyMonkey, a feedback form or poll, whatever it is, a survey that you're running. So when they go to log their hours, it will prompt them and say, do you mind completing a short survey? And it will show them that little click on it, and it will take them through to that SurveyMonkey link or Google Forms link, whether you're running the survey on. So you can do it. We've opted away from building it into the system just for that reason that I said before, in all honesty. So with some things, it's better to say, okay, well, most of our organizations, they have a preferred one. It's usually like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms that they're used to using, and the functionality they have on that would always be superior to what we'd be able to generate within a volunteer system. So we tend to go down that road.
A lot of the, sorry to interrupt there, a lot of the survey engines that you use online, like Google and SurveyMonkey, will also allow you to add a parameter to the survey. So you can add that when you're creating the opportunity, and that means that you'll know who filled out the survey because it will be linked to their volunteer ID. So that's time to check when you're running a survey, that you can send custom parameters, and what happens is when that survey is recorded, it will also tell you which ID came along with that request, so you can tie it back to your volunteer afterwards.
Yeah, because it's often a kind of issue for some people is if you create I mean, the straightforward way without doing that, it would be the first question on the survey would be, what's your name? But sometimes you're trying to anonymize the survey, maybe not anonymize, but so at the very least, it's another question that they're having to fill out needlessly, really, because you should know who they are because they're on the TeamKinetic system. So we allow you to use this little ID parameters Rolf mentioned, and you'll see it when you go to add a survey onto it, which lets you essentially it records the survey, but it also records who that volunteer is without actually having to ask their name. So just answer the questions, Rolf said. Okay. Right, that is interesting. Any more? Any other success of your volunteer program?
I think part of it for us is looking at this relates to surveys, but identifying like a volunteer experience, and also the well-being, the impact that opportunity has had, whether that's made a difference to people's lives, but also the volunteers' own well-being as well. Not 100% sure how you'd measure it, but
that's the problem, isn't it? And you know what?
Yeah.
We've raggled raggled, made up a word there. we've spoke about this for 10 years. Honestly, it's probably been 10 years about this thing. How do you measure the success of a volunteer program? And fundamentally, most of it comes down to that. What is the impact on the ground? But how you measure that is could be so different. You know what I mean? It may be measurable. In most cases, it's probably not measurable. So we have to kind of take the next best thing, which is kind of, okay, well, how many hours are logged in that, you know, area of volunteering, and maybe, you know, of my area of volunteering, and use that. But that is interesting, though. The volunteer experience, did you say?
If I can point you to the link I've just put in the chat, which is State of Life, and these guys specialize in linking volunteering to well-being, and they've got some really clever ways of doing that using survey data and big sets of data like the British Household Survey, which contain well-being questions, where they can compare your volunteer data to general populations to see the impact that the volunteering's had on their happiness, well-being, and all those key outcomes. And they've also then followed that up with what the value of that is. So using the Treasury Green Book, which they're involved in writing elements of, you can then apply a cash value to the well-being impacts of volunteering on the volunteers and the beneficiaries of the volunteering as well. So they've got a nice methodology to do that. The organisation called State of Life. I'll just pop that into the.
Thank you. I'll have a look at that.
Yeah, they've got some really cool stuff around the value of green spaces, volunteer life cycles, behavioural models for volunteering. They've got all sorts of really interesting work that's worth a look at.
Okay, that's great. Cheers, Chris. Okay, looking at the time, I have to move on pretty quick, I think. Log all hours, we covered that. Maintenance, just covered that. Day schedule reports. Active volunteers, we spoke about that. For some reason, it's took me back to the start of the slideshow. Okay. Opportunity searches. This is my favorite report, number one, and I reckon we need to put it somewhere on somewhere much more visible, because for those of you who are not aware of it, then if you go to reporting, and you go to reports and analysis, and you go to opportunities, as it loads up, get the gerbil running. Come on, there we go. And we go to opportunities. There's this one here. It's kind of hidden away, more hidden away than I'd like it. It is in a logical place, you know. Reporting library, which reports analysis under opportunities, but it shows you what people are typing in to the search bar. Okay, so what people are actually typing in to the search bar here. Okay, your front page obviously look different to this, to your search bar here. Okay, so why would that?
I don't think your screen's updating, Steve.
Oh, is it not?
You can still see the homepage, the admin homepage.
Oh, can you not see that now? My mouse moving around. Right, let me try stop sharing and resharing. I want to get through this one before the break, because this is a great report. Okay, share window. Okay, you see my mouse moving around now? Rolf? Can you see my mouse moving around?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. Okay, can you see the opportunities here?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes,
Sorry, no worries. So under opportunities, website searches, this shows you what people are actually typing into the search bar, whether it's a search bar on the front page or whether it's a search bar when they're logged in, make a difference. Picks up. So why is that important? Why would that be important? Well, it's important because if a volunteer, it kind of closes the loop. So you know you're adding these opportunities onto the system, and you're kind of assuming, obviously you have conversations with the volunteers, you're assuming you kind of know what their area of interest is, but you really know what areas they're actually interested in. If you look at the volunteer searches, you could look at all your opportunities and say, well, this is the most popular opportunity, so I think my volunteers are interested in this. All that's actually telling you is that's out of your list of opportunities, that's the one they're most interested in. What this report is telling you is what types of opportunities they're interested in, even if they don't exist on your system. So it serves two purposes, really. One of them is it lets you know, okay, well, maybe I need to create some opportunities with, say if the top search was admin, then you say, okay, then well, maybe create some opportunities which are kind of admin related. Okay, so you might speak to new providers, or you may ask internally, say, have we got any kind of admin related volunteering that we need help with? But also on top of that, on top of finding out what they're actually interested in, it also helps you look at I'm trying to think the best way to word it. So it gives you an idea of look at your existing opportunities and how you may want to retag those opportunities, if that makes sense. So, for example, if I look on the tags report and it shows me the top search term was admin, then I might say, well, I've got 10 opportunities on there which are admin related. But then when you look through those 10 opportunities, the word admin doesn't appear in the title of the opportunity. And the word admin hasn't been tagged with the word admin, but that's actually what they're typing into the system. So you can go back into those existing opportunities and retag them with the word admin. Knowing now in future, because people are typing that word into the search bar, it's now going to bring up those opportunities that you expect it to bring up. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions over that? Your hands up now. Forever hold your peace. Okay, marketing and com. Oh. Okay. We've got reports analysis, opportunities, logged hours. That's an interesting one. Reports analysis, opportunities, ops with logged hours down here somewhere. Ops with logged hours. This is a really interesting one because it shows you views as well. So I mentioned before about a view of an opportunity is when someone don't just see it on the search page, they actually click on the more details. So that's a level of interest. This is a really good way of seeing what level of interest there is in an opportunity. So you might see, you can tell obviously by the number of volunteers who join the opportunity or apply for it, but also this view column here is really useful. You might say, well, okay, then there's only it's only available for 2 volunteers to join. But then after that point, if you've got 50 people who have viewed it, that there's a real appetite for that type of opportunity there. Okay, then we've got kind of marketing related reports. So your main marketing reports are, we go to your application analytics. So this is reports analysis, application analytics. Okay, we've got this here. This is like your Google, basically it's Google Analytics. It's driven by Google Analytics report. So it shows you how many people are looking at your whole site. You saw the one before, which was specific to the opportunity. This is across the whole site. Okay, so if you went out and you're doing a big promotional drive, you're handing out leaflets, you sent out lots of emails, you turn up at a freshers fair for university, then you expect to see a big jump here. And you can zoom into certain areas and say, well, that's when we've done the big promotional drive. And you can see how many views you had, how many new visitors you had on the system, and how many pages they looked at once they're on your system. So it gives you a good indication anyway. That's a really useful report. Feedback report, everyone likes, also good for marketing.
So,
is there a question, is there?
Question from Jamie, asking about, do we have any way of seeing the Google Analytics within Kinetic?
Well, that is essentially driven by Google Analytics. The problem we have, Jamie, with it is when we link it to the TeamKinetic system, we can't link it to, as far as we're aware, and we have looked into this, linking it to two at the same time. So it's either linked to the TeamKinetic system.
Can I jump in there?
Yes, sure, yeah.
Okay, so we have our own Google Analytics account, which aggregates and splices all the data up based on the URL. So that's how we can compartmentalize it and get everyone's individual data back. But we can't give individual customers access to that global data. But we do have an ability to inject custom JSS on every page. So if you want to create your own Google Analytics account, we can incorporate that, and the data just for your domain will show up on that Google Analytics account that you have access to and you can look at.
Cheers, Rolf. Thanks. Okay, so this is really good for the feedback reports for marketing purposes. Obviously, you can get some nice quotes on here, and it was mentioned before, for your marketing material, etc. So that's a nice one. Specific queries. If you are not familiar, it is a report in a way. People might not see it as a report, but the search volunteers page, all the search pages, whether it's search volunteers, whether it's opportunities page or the providers page, they have filters at the top. Okay, these filters at the top allow you to kind of interrogate the data. It is really important that you get yourself familiar with these filters because they are so powerful within the system. Okay, so things you might be interested in, I kind of listed some down here. Okay, you've got the obvious ones like, okay, I want to know how many volunteers in this system are, say, over more than 21. And it's brilliant. It shows you how many people are over 21, of which we've got 132. You say, well, what about people who are over 21 and their gender is male, for example? So you can combine them together. Now, something that we're thinking about doing in the future is, at the moment, it's like an and, so it has to meet both criteria, is potentially have the ability to have an or instead, so they either meet this criteria or this criteria, but that may come in the future. It's something we're working on at the moment. But yeah, so you can add, but you've got some really powerful ones down here, like the date they last logged in. Why would that be a useful filter? The date they last logged in was before 6 months ago, 2022, for example, since January. Anyone answer that question? Anyone got any ideas? Why would that be a useful thing to do?
We've got a couple of hands up, Steve. We've got a hand up from Ismat.
Okay, do you want to go, Ismat? I can't hear you if you're muted.
Ismat, you're on mute at the moment.
Okay, I still can't hear.
Got...
Does somebody else have the hand up?
Oh, sorry, he's having a bit of trouble. Ismat's having a bit of trouble, but we've got a hand up from Volunteer Barnett. Volunteering Barnett, sorry.
Hi, yes. I have a question. I have a question which I'm normally having a little trouble with. How do I find out, for example, if I want to know how many volunteers applied in the month of September specifically, or any month, and they're still waiting for approval, would I be able, there is any filter that I can use to find out this?
There is a report to show you which people have applied. So how many people have applied but not been approved yet. So those who don't know, when you create an opportunity, you can mark it down as being applying, which adds an extra step in, which means that the provider has to manually approve them before they're actually on the opportunity. So essentially, they're not a volunteer at the point of applying, but once they've been approved by the admin, then they become a volunteer on the opportunity. Now, there is a kind of an ongoing issue with some of you administrators out there where providers are taking their time in terms of approving those volunteers. So they're kind of left in limbo for quite a while. There is a report on there. You're testing my knowledge now, aren't you? There is a report on here. I think it's on the dashboard, actually. It's on the dashboard. Rolf, you may know this, which shows applying activity.
It just shows outstanding
volunteer applications,
but there's no report that you can pull off which says this many were outstanding in this period, and this many were outstanding in this period. The homepage there that Steve has shown you just shows you ones that are outstanding right now.
But it's a nice suggestion, and it's one we will take away and add to the list of additional reports that we would like to add to the system.
So the new applications report on the reporting page, it can be date limited, and it will tell you the status of applications in that period, but it won't give you a list of the volunteers that had applied in that period. You could say from March to April, put the date in for that, and it will tell you there were 10 applications, there were 20 people waiting, and there were 5 people that have been approved in that period.
Yeah. Cheers, Rolf. Thanks. Okay, so yeah, get yourself familiar with them, and there's the same kind of thing. Those filters we just saw there on the search volunteers page. Go back to that search volunteers page. Those filters that we saw down here, there's the same thing when you go to the opportunities page or the providers page. Obviously, they're different filters because it's different types of data, but you have a similar list, and you can also similar list on those pages as well. You can also filter by your custom fields as well. But there is some really good stuff down here. Another one that jumps out at me is joined categories. So show me every volunteer that's joined an opportunity within a certain category. Okay, think about the usefulness of that. Okay, being able to say, okay, show me every volunteer that's joined on an opportunity, which is ball sport, which has a category set as ball sports. Then you've got a load of volunteers, and you say, well, okay, well, I've got a new opportunity that's coming out, and I really want to try and promote it. Or maybe it's an opportunity that you need to get people on urgently because it's taking place soon. There's not enough on there. You can quickly select them and send an email then just to those volunteers that you know have showed a previous interest in that type of opportunity. I'm looking at the time now, and I realise I'm 2 minutes over. So just be aware, I'm going to skip over some pages here potentially that you're all going to receive. We'll email it out, listing all of these reports with the locations of all these reports as well to you. So you don't have to worry too much. I'll skip over them now. Okay, with the maps, I think most of you are familiar with the maps on here. So we can see the map on here where all the volunteers come from. This is always really good. And when you zoom in, it kind of starts to atomize. That's another word, isn't it? I'm sure that's an IT jargon again. It starts to kind of breaks it down so we start seeing these individual people that you can click on, and you can even drill down and click on the person's name, and it will take you right the way through to that volunteer's profile, if you so choose. Okay, so that's a really good one to look at. Custom reports. Sometimes I always say with custom reports, people ask me, say, if it's a report that you have to do like one-off, maybe once a year or something, then often it's better to just download the data to Excel and do it yourself. Just being completely honest here, because you think, well, it's only a one-off, I can go down. The reason being is custom reports are chargeable, because obviously someone like this then has to sit down and create them. But if it's something that you're doing every month, then you might say, actually, the time it's taken me to create this report, to download this data and manipulate the columns and everything else to create this report, I might just have nice to have a click of a button, and I can just see the pie chart or the data and download it all in one place. We do that for a number of customers already. So if it's something that you're interested in, you can always raise a support ticket or drop us an email, and we can set up those custom reports for you. Okay. Downloading data, discrepancies in data. This is the last slide now. So sometimes you'll see discrepancies in data. We are always trying, sometimes it's legitimate, and it's usually to do with like active volunteers, and we've cleaned up a lot of that now and made sure that the same phrase, we have the same understanding of what an active volunteer is, no matter where you are on the system. Because I understand from your perspective, it's kind of reconciling the data is a key thing. When you see a top line figure, you want to try to drill down there and add up those numbers, and it agrees with that top line figure, so you have confidence in the data. Sometimes it doesn't, and the reason sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's a misunderstanding of the terminology, like I say, an active volunteer, for the reasons what I mentioned before, and sometimes it's anonymized volunteers. I've seen that a few times before as well. A volunteer leaves the system or something like that, so he gets anonymized. We can't say specifically who it is. And you're going through and adding up all the logged hours for all of those volunteers, but then you don't see the volunteers actually remove themselves from the system. Okay, so sometimes that could be an issue as well. But I think that's pretty much it. Is there any questions, anybody, before we break up for lunch? No?
Fantastic. Well, we have got a few minutes over, so if I can suggest we come back to this meeting link at about 3:05. Sorry, 1:05 even. Sorry, not 3:05. 1:05. And then I can share with you the breakout group links, and we can work through who wants to go into which group. I've also just had a quick question here from Isma asking about when the new system will be available that we showed you this morning. The plan is that we open it now for beta for at least 2 weeks, and that means that you guys can go and check out that beta site, play around with it, try it with some of your own data to make sure that what we're suggesting and what we're trying to build isn't going to break the way you want to use the system. If there's any feedback from your experience of using that beta site, then please let us know as soon as possible. Support tickets, emails, smoke signals, chat boxes, whatever it is, let us know if there's problems with that new layout and the new feature set, so we can make sure that we can either mitigate those issues for you guys or make it an option that's turn on or offable or something like that. We don't want to launch something that you guys haven't had a chance to get your hands on first to have a look at. We suggest 2 weeks for that beta site. If you find something that's obviously really serious, then the launch date may be pushed back a little bit. But we're looking at launching, all being well. Rolf, just remind me, we were talking at the start of November?
Yeah, last day of October, which is a Monday.
last day of there you go. Last day of October is the planned date right now, assuming we don't find anything massive and critical during this last stage of testing. So hopefully we should have some more help documents and materials coming your way before the launch goes live. But the key thing is getting hands-on with it and having a play around and telling us what you think. Okay. Go and enjoy your lunch, and we will see you back at 1:05 for this afternoon sessions. Thanks a lot. We will be managed. We will be. There's no transfer of data. It just updates the service and the website updates without any of your data changing. So you don't have to do anything for the new version. It just happens. Okay, and you get all the new features. Go and have your lunch. We're going to be managing the chat over lunch. We'll keep an eye on it. If you need anything, feel free to get in touch with us on there, and we will speak to you at 1:05.